Hello, just coming back from doing an interview that some of y'all heard earlier today, an interview with Santa Claus. Yeah, and I'm looking like Santa Claus myself today, but it wasn't an interview with myself. It was an interview with one of the Santa Clauses that was doing Santa like me. And we learned that there might be a union going on in the North Pole. And we learned that there are other things taking place, including the fact that apparently Mr. Putin got some coal, but it wasn't as much coal as he thought he was going to get because there was going to try to give that ability of hope and all along those lines of redemption and in that space. So that's some of the things that Santa Claus shared with me and all in that way. He also said that he and one of the reindeers, I think it was Dancer, usually are sitting there, watching the games. And apparently he let the reindeer in the house and they're sitting there hanging out watching the games and different other things. And there were some other jewels that he let me know, including a young kid in an apartment that apparently wanted a pony. How you going to fit a pony into an apartment is beyond me and all along those lines. And he did say that a certain person in politics was trying to find the fountain of youth. It didn't say which one, but I can guess which one that was and all along those lines. And he said another one was trying to find a personality and another one was asking whether they should run for the White House and all of that. And apparently Santa was saying that they didn't need to do that. But we'll find out if they listen to that advice or not listen to that advice as well. So that's some of the things that was told in that interview. Hope that y'all folks will go back, watch it, and check it out and see what other jewels of knowledge that Santa gave on this particular interview. This is our second time at Pod TV having an exclusive interview with Santa Claus. So we're on top of the news and actually finding out what goes on after the fact. And apparently he's on his way to the Bahamas, but he's not letting the other folks know that because he wants the elves to think he's going to Jamaica. But that was revealed in the interview as well. And I'm sure that the elves were listening. So they now know where he's going. And they'll probably change their flight plans and all along those lines. Now to some more serious news. Apparently, like I mentioned yesterday, Pope Emeritus Benedict, his condition is staying very serious. Pope Francis said that. So a lot of people are paying attention to what is going on in that part of the world, as apparently his health is continuing to worsen and all in that space. And 120 Russian missiles recently targeted Ukrainian cities in a fresh strike. So they are beefing up their attacks on that area, and at least 16 were killed after a fire broke out at a Cambodian casino. So that is something that was going on over there in Cambodia. And the Biden administration has announced new COVID test requirements on travelers from China. So they're saying that if you're coming from China, they've got some restrictions that they're going to be placing on there. And I know that a episode that will air later today, we'll be talking about Kosovo, and apparently that is definitely soaring in tensions as well. So tensions soaring as Kosovo shuts the main border crossing with Serbia. So that is something that I know a lot of folks are going to be paying attention to as well. And apparently, there's still those mysterious circumstances surrounding the death of certain Russian tycoons, I should say, including the one that just had that fall in India not that long ago, and we talked about that as well. And apparently the migrants waiting to cross the border will have to wait longer, and that was after the Supreme Court made their Title 42 border security ruling. And definitely there are certain voices out there that were praising that decision, and it'll be interesting to see what folks have to say about that as well. And definitely, even there in Israel, we're seeing some new news out of there. Benjamin Netanyahu has returned to power in Israel as a new government is sworn in power. And of course, he is seen as a hard right leader. And his government has already vowed to expand the West Bank settlements and all along those lines. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the Middle East, which is another hot topic part of the world and all in that kind of way. And if you're wondering about gas prices, European natural gas prices have dropped back to the pre-Ukraine war level, and all in that kind of way. And 18 children are dead in Uzbekistan after consuming India-made syrup. So that is something I'm sure folks will be following in the world as well. But a lot is going on in the world, and apparently Mr. Putin is at it again. He's attempting to undermine oil price caps as the global energy market fractures. And of course, we're still hearing conversations around what's going on in Afghanistan and their thoughts around women's rights and all in that space. And China just stays in the news because more than 200 cars were involved in a massive pileup in China's Zhengzhou region, and all in that kind of way. So definitely China is in the world, and oil prices shed gains as China COVID cases soar, and all in that way. And last but not least, the Turkey and the Syria defense ministers were having a meeting in Moscow. So I don't know what's going on with that, and maybe other folks have some thoughts as well. So I'm going to bring up Chris Greco and see what he's got to say about some of the things that I brought up, including that special exclusive interview with none other than Santa Claus, which I had earlier today, and all in that way. So definitely glad to see Chris here. I've also got Lee Newton Rhodes with me as well, and all in that space. And I see, how are you doing? Santa was not feeling all that well either. So COVID apparently also impacts Santa on occasion as well. But he was blaming it on the kids that were sniffling and, definitely hugging him and all in that line. But he did say that there were some that were not feeling all that well, and he was a little under the weather, but he still gave us about an hour interview. So that was a great conversation with Santa. And apparently there's a whole army of Santa. So there's a whole village up there in the North Pole is one of the things that he revealed.
So, one second, Chris, I apologize.
You're back again.
I actually caught part of that interview with Santa, and I'm just curious as to your concern to the elves, if they're going to be displaced by the jobs, what have you. Why don't they just learn to code?
Hey, that's a good point. And apparently Santa was saying that, he's taking them to school. So maybe he's taking them to coding school, and then they can learn to code. And then that could be a issue, and they don't have to have their union and everything. So that's a good idea. I might have to go back and see what his thoughts are about coding, because he did say he was taking them to school. So and not just that philosophy of taking people to school because you're teaching them something in the sense of like taking them to school on a basketball court, but he was taking them to school.
Well, I think to add to that, Mark and Lee, I think if we're going to call it something instead of self-study, we call it elf study. I think that's really, it just kind of falls right in there because everything's virtual, right? So I mean, you got so elf study. I just thought I'd throw that in there. Just thought of it.
I like that. And along those same lines, but I don't think that this person was on Santa's good list and everything, but apparently there is a part of the U.S., we're talking about the U.S., there's a part of the U.S. that is doing something very interesting, and I wish Nick was here because he would have some thoughts about this, but the U.S. Virgin Islands is suing J.P. Morgan's over Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking scheme. So apparently the U.S. Virgin Islands is going to sue a major corporation over Jeffrey Epstein. I don't know how all this is going to work, but that was reported in several publications, including The Guardian, The Hill, and The New York Times. So
what are the damages? I mean, what do they suffer? How does it affect them?
That's a good
reputation.
What are you talking about? There's a tourist destination now.
Well, first of all, they can't call it the Virgin Island anymore. I mean, they're going to call it something else. And the second thing is that, you talk about reputation aspects, and a lot of people are suing now, Lee, because of reputation. So they're saying, look, we want so much money to help to recover, remediate our reputation damage from this situation. For instance, the individual in Idaho, the associate professor that was brought in on that conspiracy theory thing, that they said, she was part of the deal, and she actually cajoled the individuals to kill the students in Idaho and whatever else. They got a lawyer and sued for defamation.
Chris,
yeah. So that's
I understand going after Epstein and his estate, but to go after our government, that's to insinuate that maybe our politicians had something are going on.
And who are we to disagree? I mean,
it's the government, and you got a good point, Lee.
They have the receipts. Let them show it.
Yeah.
The exact story is the U.S. Virgin Island government filed a lawsuit Tuesday, so that was 2 days ago, against J.P. Morgan Chase, alleging that the Wall Street bank benefited financially from Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking operation.
Oh, I have no doubt.
Duty
I have
report
no doubt,
malicious
Mark.
financial
I would love
activity.
to see airport video from their, local. If they
Well,
don't show it.
I'd love to see how J.P. Morgan Chase, how they were, is this money laundering? I mean, how did they hide those funds that was coming in from us? Look, Epstein did this for how long? And was basically everyone turned their heads on the whole thing, and it didn't really happen, and no, Prince Andrew and the rest of them, and I mean, they're sitting back going, hey, look, yeah, I visited the guy and whatever else, I was on the island, and I had a couple of pictures taken, but hey, no big deal.
Bill Clinton say he didn't inhale.
Yeah, he did inhale, right? Well, also, just to set the record straight on Bill Clinton did write a letter talking, when he was an ROTC, saying that he would not accept the commission because he did not believe in military service. And I sit back and I go, that letter was brought up once during the campaign with George H.W. Bush, and it was kind of like, oh yeah, everyone just felt that way. Bill Clinton just put it in writing. It's kind of like, no, I was a commander of ROTC at one point in time, and you give me that letter. Guess what? You're going to go on. You don't want the commission? Fine, we'll bring you in as enlisted because you signed a contract. So they should have brought him in as enlisted and sent him off to Vietnam. After all, he was a big fan of Kennedy. He loved John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy started Vietnam. He started our involvement in Vietnam. So Bill Clinton, being an absolute disciple of JFK, should have said, hey, that's JFK's war. I'm going to support it because I love JFK, and I should go and do that, and that's what I should do.
Chris, along those same lines, and this is actually both sides because Epstein apparently hit both politicians, both the Democrats and Republicans. But the lawsuit claims that J.P. Morgan Chase failed to make proper regulatory filings that could have tipped off the government to Epstein's alleged sex trafficking of underage girls through private islands. So
now we're talking Security Exchange Commission. Yeah. See, now that's the SEC. And what they should have done was they should have said Virgin Islands should have, instead of suing whatever, they should have taken that documentation and thrown it over to the Security and Exchange Commission and said, look, this is enough to investigate. Yeah, that's what you do. Investigate J.P. Morgan Chase and make that happen.
In all fairness, someone tried to do that with a laptop to the FBI. They just sat on it. You need to go to the press with this stuff.
But Lee, the FBI was so busy. I mean, wait a minute, you got to cut them a break. They were so busy trying to get as much evidence as possible against Trump. They didn't have time. They just didn't have time. Every agent available was being thrown against the Trump problem because, of course, his was a much bigger problem than Biden. I mean, hey, come on, cut me a break. But not to get off track. But two things you didn't hit, Mark, on the international side. So I have my share map on there. Yeah. If you hit that, the one country I wanted to go over today, just real quickly, was Lebanon. And Lebanon's here, and it's Israel is here and Syria is here. So you have Lebanon right in here. Right now, they have a larger inflation. They have a larger inflation, and I won't tell you the numbers yet. I'm just going to let you try to guess that. They have a larger inflation. This is Lebanon here, Beirut here, and basically it's a country that just is dying slowly but surely, right? They have a larger inflation than, guess what country? Well, that would be Zimbabwe, which is all the way down here. So you have Zimbabwe here, not Zambia, Zimbabwe. Where are you? You're here. There you go. Zimbabwe, right? Yeah. So Zimbabwe, they have a higher inflation than Zimbabwe. I mean, think about that. Isn't that insane? I mean, that's kind of nutsy cuckoo. And then this is a map I wanted to show. This is a map I wanted to show you about.
Before you get off
that I got from Excel that talks about COVID-19 and the basically detection of stuff in sewers, of the wastewater, and you can see, North Carolina's up there. The detection within the last 15 days. So a million, you have a million. It's gone up. Virginia, Pennsylvania, not as much. Illinois, a lot. Michigan, a lot. Down over here, you have Colorado, and then you have, interestingly enough, Oregon and California. It's huge. Huge amount of detectives. So, I mean, COVID is not going away by any stretch of the imagination, but it is interesting that the amount of vaccination in California is also huge. So, and I think Leo will appreciate this, is why is it that we have so much COVID-19 in California when basically Newsom has stated that everyone's going to get boosted upon boosted, the 6th booster, the 7th booster, whatever else. And same with Illinois, and the same with, you have Virginia, which basically is a Democrat state. You have Utah, it's Republican. But I mean, look at all these other states in here. Hardly any.
Are you saying there's no
hardly any
positive
detection
correlation
whatsoever.
between vaccines and treatment?
Well,
There might be a correlation. I don't know if there's a causation, but this is honest to God, no kidding, current data. This is data I just got from the CDC, and I downloaded it from Excel, and Excel has this great 3D mapping ability to be able to do that. And I just basically mapped this into these different states and exactly what's going on. It's by county.
CDC data,
but
is
I
it
did it by
reliable?
state.
But
Is
Chris,
CDC data reliable?
I really do trust. Yeah, I really do trust CDC data. I'll tell you why. Is because when CDC gets data, they say the sources of those data. So basically what happens is every single state has the same standard by which they test wastewater. So but what they do is they go out to different countries.
I apologize, Chris. Across the board, can we trust CDC data? I'm going
Yes.
somewhere with this.
I mean, I do.
Are they in charge of the VAERS report?
Well, I'll tell you, the reason I trust CDC data is because CDC gets it from the county and the state health departments in these different areas. So they don't go out and they don't try to collect data. They get it from secondary sources. So do I trust CDC? Do I trust CDC data? Yes. Do I trust the data that's from all the counties and the states and whatever else? I should trust it because it's very, it should be very consistent. But there's always that chance that there's some issues having to do with that.
My point being is CDC is in charge of the vaccine injury reports, are they not?
CDC is in charge of the vaccination reports by each state, and they have a code, and that code is a code that's put out that is a standard code for each hospital and each doctor and whatever else to use to code each patient that comes in.
And there would be no reason for them to squash those numbers, would there? Like for COVID-19 injuries?
No, there would be no reason to. But what they would do is it would all depend. It would all depend on a couple of things, and I think this is importantly.
Is a reason to.
Yeah, well, if you have a situation, I just wanted to show the different inflation here real quick. Yeah, 500% here, 500% in Venezuela, 245% up here in, I think this is South Sudan, which is in bad shape, and up in here, Turkey, 60.5%. So they're really hurting in these areas. But anyways, but getting back to your deal is this. If you walk into my hospital and my hospital gets so much funding because you're a COVID patient, if you end up detected as COVID, I'm going to mark you down as a COVID patient. If you come in with a scratched finger and I say, look, I have this cough. Well, let's just test you for COVID just to make sure. And test you for COVID. Hey, you're detected for COVID-19. You have a scraped finger. I'm going to put you down primarily as a COVID patient, secondarily as having that cut finger.
I get all that. What I was talking about is people who are getting these vaccines and coming up with an illness or side effect or dying within 30 days, for example. And then the CDC, it has an incentive not to listen to those numbers so much and publicize them because the pharmaceutical companies who are putting out these vaccines and the government who are promoting them are not going to be happy campers.
But the CDC doesn't own that data. The data is owned by the state. It's owned by the county.
I understand that.
So the CDC, right? So the CDC will publish secondary data that they get from each county in each area. So basically, it's not CDC per se. It's whatever health area says. Hey, this is what's happening.
To squash or massage these numbers. Do they not?
Well, data manipulation is done a lot, more so than it should be done, right? And sometimes that data cleaning is done to try to make the data more readable, try to make it more analyzable. The analysts make it better, right? But in some cases, data manipulation is just that. That's why, as a data analyst and a data analyst instructor, I never say manipulate the data. I say clean the data. If you clean the data,
should not be doing with the bias.
That's right.
I'm not convinced that's what's happening.
Well, and that's okay. And that's, I would say that unless there's real honest to God, like I have the data show and I show different aspects. I mean, the data show this week is talking about stuff like the 5-second rule, and how that works. I mean, there's an actual study done on this. So things like that, studies are studies. And Lee, I'm not disputing at all that people are dying from the vaccination, but people die from every vaccination. People die from the flu vaccination. People die from,
Chris, but when the swine flu vaccination came out, they squashed it. They stopped it. They pulled that vaccine.
They did.
After certain, I think 6 or.
Well, that was 1976. In fact, I have a book coming out that goes through that, the different areas and why.
But they're not treating the COVID-19 vaccine in the same way. Same seriousness.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things that I don't.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Lee.
Your thoughts, and even Lee, you might want to jump at this as well. But by the way, yesterday, the U.S. says that it recorded its 100 millionth COVID case, but they're saying that more than 200 million Americans probably had it. So I do know some friends of mine that even think that they had it at some point, even in the early stages, but it was never 100% diagnosed. So they're saying that the figures are already wrong in that sense, because that's double what they're actually saying have had it. And I have heard reports, I forget the exact numbers, I was actually looking those up, that a lot of people got those initial shots, the first 2 shots, but there was a sizable amount of people that had those same concerns that you have, Lee, and everything, and they opted not to get the 3rd, 4th, or 5th shot, or whatever we're supposed to be on now. I think 6 or 7 in terms of boosters. So there is a sizable amount of people that were still concerned about the vaccine and concerned about the nature of the vaccine and opted not to get the rest of the shots that the government and the CDC.
I'm sorry, Mark, how many cases did you say there were in COVID-19?
U.S. as of
just U.S. Just U.S.
in COVID cases, but they also
100 million.
Well, I have it on my share screen, but from who? So I have it on my share screen. How many cases? How many deaths? Go ahead.
Okay, fine, great. Had we ever treated any other illness with this method of counting number of cases, even asymptomatic? Did we ever?
Yes, we did. The swine flu. The swine flu was done exactly that way in 1976. And Legionnaires,
even if we have symptoms,
and Legionnaire's disease was done the same way.
Did we ever test the population in general, even with no symptoms?
No, not for Legionnaires. In fact, when Legionnaires came out, did you know that there are 10,000 cases of Legionnaire's disease right now in the United States? 10,000 cases.
We're not shutting schools down?
And the thing is, no. I mean, I had to look that up. And CDC does have that data. So basically, Legionnaire's is coming up. What they call the Pontiac flu, which is also part of Legionnaire's. But Legionnaire's disease, Lee, is bacterial. It's not viral. So now swine flu was viral, and swine flu was treated that way. Now, we didn't wear masks, but there was a mandatory vaccination in 1976, and I remember because I was in college at the time, and basically everybody, all college students had to have swine flu, and I didn't get it. I didn't get the swine flu shot, and I told my roommate, I said, "You getting it?" He goes, "No, I'm not getting it." I said, "But if anybody asks, we got it," and he goes, "Right on." So nobody asked us, but everyone that got it, all our friends got it. They were sicker than dogs. It was right during finals. They were sicker than dogs. I mean, they brought in cots to put people in rooms because they were so sick that they were having the test brought in to the room, but nobody was wearing masks. The mask thing this mask thing came into being with this COVID-19 deal. And I swear to God, it was because the Chinese were wearing masks. All of a sudden we had to wear masks. So it was like this weird situation. We've gone through swine flu. We've gone through Legionnaires. We've gone through all these different things, and we never had mask mandates. All of a sudden we had mask mandates. And I just don't, I kind of understand that, but I don't understand that because cloth masks do not work. They came out with that. They sort of, oh, it's better than nothing. Wait a minute. Whoa. But it's not working. Why are we wearing cloth masks if it's not working? But getting back to the data, but basically, according to, now you're saying the 100 million mark was hit. According to WHO, there were 99 million cases, and there were 1 million deaths. 1 million out of 330 million people. So, I mean, you're still 1 in 330. So that's still a very, very low. That's a very low percentage of deaths when you're talking about the entire population aspects. When
Chris,
you take a look,
Chris, are you able to break out those deaths by age and by whether these people had comorbidities?
Actually, I can't. Let me look that up. I will look that up. But CDC does have those deaths, and they do have it from the comorbidity aspects. But while you guys are talking, let me look that up. I'll get that.
And everything,
yep.
Just to pivot slightly, but we will come back to that.
Yes,
and
please.
Along those lines. But you had mentioned earlier about Lebanon. There were a couple of things that you mentioned, and apparently the Jordan king, because they are under a monarchy, has warned Israel not to cross the red lines on Jerusalem's holy site. So I know we were talking about the role of other Middle Eastern countries within that region, and apparently the king of Jordan has basically thrown down a gauntlet in that sense, because we do know that Netanyahu is considered a hardliner, and now he's over there saying, hey, you can't cross this red line on these.
Can you tell us what those red lines are? I'm not familiar with the red lines.
I'm getting ready to try to find out exactly what those are, and I will gladly do that with no problem at all in that space and everything. There was another part of the world that I was going to get to as well that I know that Chris will enjoy while I find those red lines and the exact quote that he gave and all in that space, because Africa was in the news, and it was actually a part of Africa that is in the war-torn area, and I think that was Ethiopia. But yes, Jordan's King Abdullah II has warned that the incoming Israeli government not to cross Jordan's red line with regard to Jerusalem's holy site, while expressing concerns over the potential for a massive outbreak of Palestinian unrest. In an interview with CNN that aired on yesterday, Abdullah was asked if he believes that the status quo in Jerusalem and Jordan's rule were under threat. Jordan views itself as a custodian of the Temple Mount, setting up a potential clash with hardline lawmakers from incoming Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition, like Atzma Yahed's chief Itamar Ben Gvir, which pushed for Israel to assert its sovereignty over the Jerusalem holy site and allow Jewish worship there. So that apparently is one of the sites that they are talking about. You will always have people that will try and push that. And that is a concern, Abdullah said, without mentioning names. If people want to get into a conflict with us, we are quite prepared. I've always said, I will always like to believe that let's look at the glass half full, but we have set red lines, and if people want to push those red lines, then we will deal with that, he added.
Yeah, I never understood that. I understand the mosque, as terms of Muslims, but in terms of the Temple Mount, why is that not open to everybody and to do whatever they want with it? It's just a piece of land, whether you're Christian, Jewish, or nothing, or Hindu. Why can't you go up there and pray like you can in a park? I understand, the mosque itself is a holy site,
Right.
to Muslims not to go in there. But the Temple Mount, I don't get why Jordan should tell Israel, sorry, nobody can go up there, or nobody can go up there and pray except Muslims.
Well, apparently, and this is just some of the history, and like I said, I don't get it as well, but the Temple Mount houses the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
No, it does. Yeah, right.
Site. It is also believed by Jews to be the historic site location of the two Jewish temples, making it Judaism.
Which makes it, for Judaism, it makes it the holiest site in Judaism. A lot of people say the Western Wall is the holiest site. That's not true. The Western Wall is the holiest site that people can go to pray, but it's not the holiest site. The holy site is the Temple Mount, because that's where the temples were.
And apparently it's part in the various wars, because it says Israel captured the Temple Mount and Jerusalem's old city from Jordan in the 1967 Six-Day War. However, it allowed the Jordanian Waqf, or however that's pronounced, to continue.
You pronounce it correct.
to maintain religious authority atop the mount under their 1994 peace treaty. Israel recognized Amman's special role in Muslim holy shrines in Jerusalem. So apparently that was.
Some would say that was a mistake, whatever, but it is what it is.
Right. Yeah, it is what it is, and like I said, it seems like some political grandstanding on both sides of who has the rights and the control, and all along those lines.
And speaking about that, yeah, since we're on the topic, I don't know if Chris can come up with this data or not, but there have been polls done on not the Israeli Jews or Christians, what have you, but the Arabs living in the Arab territories, if you want to call it that, in Israel, whether they would rather be under the state of Israel or under Gaza and Hamas ruling. And I believe that it always comes up, the majority want to stay the status quo and do not want to be under the PA's ruling. They would rather be under Israelis' ruling, as much as they may not favor it.
Well, take a look.
Yeah, well, I was going to say,
just like a lot of people come in and criticize America, but I don't see them leaving on planes.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, because I mean, I think that it is, and I've brought this up before, I think it is fair to be critical of a place that you live in and everything, and not necessarily feel that you have to be running to someplace else.
No, that's a fair point. You can be critical of it, you should be critical of it, but don't make it out to be the worst thing, on earth since hell. Everything else is better, but you're not going to better.
Right. Yeah, no, I found that data, and I found that the problem is, and I think this is kind of important, is that it's on my share screen, but basically, I mean, the poll is 93% of Eastern Jerusalem Arabs prefer Israeli rule. Now,
how high?
93%, but
that's,
and this is very important. But this is very important. This story was put out by the Jewish News Syndicate. Okay. I mean, okay, you can, it's the survey. And so let's take a look and see. So I always try to get to the main survey, right? Oh, God. Oh, great. It's great. It's all Arabic. All right. So let's see if this thing will actually translate.
Google Translate.
Yeah, we'll see. I sometimes it'll do it, sometimes it won't.
While you're doing that, and definitely the great conversations and everything, well, the thing that I was going to bring up, just the other world news I was going to get to, was Ethiopia, and I know you brought this up before, Chris, is Ethiopia's Tigray conflict is still been going on, and apparently the Ethiopian Airlines have resumed commercial flights in rebel-held Tigray capital. So definitely that is going on.
Well, good.
That's
great.
Aba and Mekelle, which I think is the area where it is the capital that they are talking about. So hopefully that means that there can be some more traffic back and forth, and maybe that can alleviate some of the conflict.
So this is the original poll was done. This is a good thing, Lee. By the it says Shafa, the fieldwork branch of the Palestine News Network, Shafa, conducted an opinion poll in the city of Jerusalem about the choice between a continuation of Israeli rule over the city or the transfer of rule to the Palestinian Authority. Sample included 1,200 Arabs, which actually is a very good sample, by the way. 1,200 is really good. Who hold a blue Israeli identity card. Okay, so that interesting, but I mean, it'd be the same thing, I guess, as a U.S. citizen type thing. The respondents answered that 1,116 people preferred the Israeli rule of the city to remain, while 84 people answered they prefer the transfer of power to the Palestinian Authority. So this actually makes it better, Lee. This is the Palestine News Network. Now the Jerusalem Jerusalem News published that, but basically I always go to the study itself, because that tells me, is it biased? Is there a problem? What else happens there? So that's it. Also, to let you know, Mark, is that the situation between Kosovo and Serbia seems to be lessening. They got rid of the barricades, so it looks like that is going to it's going to be able to be resolved, hopefully, between Kosovo and Serbia. But that is an ongoing deal, because Kosovo is 93% Muslim, and Serbia is 84, not 85% Orthodox, and there's an issue there. I think a religious issue as well as basically a cultural issue. And the Albanians moved into Kosovo. Ethnic Albanians had a lot of people in Kosovo. So I think that's going to be an ongoing issue. But right now the barricades are coming down, so the Kosovar police are backing off. The Serbian military is backing off, so it's kind of hopefully it'll resolve itself.
Speaking of ongoing conflicts, we didn't get to it that much today, but I did mention some of it earlier, and that is the lovely war in Ukraine and what Putin's latest craziness is. But apparently he's come up with another ingenious way to keep his, soldiers happy or whatever along those lines. Because Russia has come up with this notion of troops fighting in the Ukraine, which a lot of them are going to heading right to death, and all of that can apparently freeze their sperm for free. So this is apparently something he's doing, I guess, to get the soldiers motivated or to continue the legacy or whatever is going. But he has made this a thing to go on, and says by popular demand, Russia may now allow the soldiers to do that. I'm going like, y'all are heading off to war, and the Ukrainians are not exactly backing down. So many of you are heading off to death. So I guess this is the way that your other half, your spouses, can still have your child after they have died in the war. But I don't remember anybody, and you were in the military for years, Chris, that has been something that was done historically. And I was going like, this is a new strategy, and I've not heard of this strategy before. But is this something that is common in wars?
And repeat that question one more time.
Is this some tactic that Putin has come up with? Is this something that many other warlords or others have done? Because in my mind, he's very much of a warlord. But I'm going like, wait a minute. So
I'll tell you, you've hit the nail on the head with Putin. That's exactly what he is. He is a warlord. And everyone talks about Mikhail Gorbachev as this great and glorious hero. But if it weren't for Gorbachev, there wouldn't have been Yeltsin. If there weren't for Yeltsin, it wouldn't have been Putin. So I mean, Gorbachev kind of set this country up for failure, and Putin just kind of walked right in and just did it. Look, I'm going to tell you something. Russia is not Russia. It is the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. They are trying to come back and be the Soviet Union. They're doing everything possible to do that. Belarus is one of the areas I call the like faux Warsaw Pact, that they're kind of aligning themselves with Russia. But they're not really committing, but they're kind of aligning themselves with them. And I'll tell you, Putin he's in a situation right now where there are young people that are escaping from Russia. They're not going to be allowed back in. And the thing is that he's losing money because people with money are going to other areas like France or wherever else where they're allowed in, and they're doing those areas. But yeah, Putin. I think you phrased it exactly right. The guy is a warlord. I mean, he's got. I mean, if you want to see something that's an interesting TV show, watch Jack Ryan on Amazon. It's in season 3. Every time that show comes up, I wonder who the advisor is to that show. And I wonder when they're going to be knocking at the door, charging them with the Espionage Act. Because, man, let me tell you something. I was part of the intelligence community, and Jack Ryan, I mean, every time I watch that show, I'm like gasping. And my wife goes, "What are you gasping about?" And I go, "I can't tell you." But basically, it's so freaking realistic where they're getting that crap, I have no idea. But right now, this is about Russia. The one on season 3 is about Russia and about possible coup and everything else. So it's really interesting.
That's just one show that's like that. I've been saying for years, I don't know that y'all are going to agree with me, but if you watch some of the quote unquote science fiction shows, I used to be a big fan when it was on, and it's been off for years, of the X-Files, and a lot of that stuff sounded like it was ripped from the headlines as well, even though it was straight fiction and everything. So yeah, sometimes I do wonder whether some of the writers don't have a direct in to some of the government people, because some of the things that are written, I'm going like, okay, that sounds a little bit too realistic and a little too close to truth and all of that, including some of the investigations into whether there are aliens or not aliens.
Well, also, interestingly enough, it was, I hope, and I don't know if I was on the 19th or not. I think the 17th of December was a Saturday, I think. But, it's next year, it will be 120 years since the Wright brothers flew at Kitty Hawk. Mm-hmm. So it was 119 years this year. And I maybe heard one thing about it. and that was it. And I'm sitting back going, it's amazing to me how people forget. That I'll tell you what they forget. They forget D-Day. Every year they sit there and say Memorial Day, Memorial Day, Memorial Day. June 6th come up and he goes, yeah, June 6th another day. No, that's freaking D-Day. Every year we need to get down on our knees and thank God that there were people that were willing to put their lives on the line before anything else. And let me tell you something. I don't know how Putin is going to be able to do that when they finally withdraw from Ukraine, or when it happens. I don't know how he's going to sit back and go, boy, we ought to thank God for those people that put their lives on the line to take territory that really wasn't theirs. I mean, I don't know how he's going to do that. And also, I disagree with Zelensky being Person of the Year for Time. I totally and completely disagree with that. Zelensky shouldn't even be on that cover. He shouldn't even be. You know who should be? It should be the men and women that and women and children and men that have lost their lives in the Ukraine in the battle for their own country. Those are the people of the year, not Zelensky. Now, Zelensky sits back and he says, I'm the leader and I'm going to go out and I'm going to go see this and see that and do this and do that. And I want more money. I want more money. I want more money. These poor saps are sitting there with AK-47s battling the Russians for every foot of land that is theirs that the Russians came in and took. Those are the people of the year, not Zelensky. I'm sick and tired of this. Oh, he's the leadership and all that. Right, Dan? Isn't it the freaking troops on the line? I mean, those are the people that are risking their freaking lives, not Zelensky. Zelensky's back in the palace, and every so often he comes out and he gives medals out, or he goes to the U.S. and says, hey, we need more money. Hey, we really appreciate what U.S. is doing, but give us a couple more billion, How much of that is going into his pocket? I'd like to know.
He's a corrupt dictator.
Well, I told this to Sasha, and Sasha kind of busted me on it. But he didn't really bust me on it. But there was a Ukraine poll right before Putin went into Ukraine. Zelensky had a 20% approval rating going into that. 20%. I mean, nobody liked the guy. Then all of a sudden the war happened, and all of a sudden his deal went up to 90%. And I sit back and I go, I hate to be a conspiracy theorist, but it's really funny that Zelensky was about to lose his lunch on the next election, and now all of a sudden everyone sits there and says, he ought to be president for life. It's like, that's interesting how that all works. So I mean, I'm sitting back saying, Person of the Year, bullcrap.
But anyone that would say anything different is being silenced or is dead.
Yeah, the thing was when people, and Dan, you may disagree with me on this, but when the Republicans or whomever did not stand up and clap whenever Zelensky was there and stood up, Zelensky represents Ukraine. I would have stood up and clapped, not so much for Zelensky, but for who he represents, which is those people that are battling every foot with frickin', fires, made out of wood so that they can survive the night in the cold, and then they can go ahead and battle some more against these invading Russians. That's what I would have done. I mean, to sit there and to sit there and say, I'm not going to clap no matter what he says. At the end of that, I would have gone to the press and said, look, I wasn't clapping for him. I was clapping for his country. The Ukrainians need to drive the Russians out. And Dan, as well as I do, it's not going to take the Ukrainians to do that. It's going to take the U.S. and NATO to go to Russia, to go to Moscow in mass, the NATO representatives, and to sit there and talk to Putin and say, we've had enough. If you do not stop this war and you do not pull out, we are going to lambaste all the border troops, all the troops you have with NATO weapons. And if you want to make this into a NATO Russia war, we're in. Because I'll tell you something, it'll last a week and Russia will lose their shorts and it will be over. So stop and get the hell out, or else we're going to go in with our weapons and our people, and we're going to drive you back, and we're going to be done. So what do you want to do with this? And China's not going to do anything. They're going to sit back. They may go to take Taiwan, but that's going to be about it. But we need to show some force here. And Biden is never going to show force because Biden is this close to being a coward. He's not what I would call a very ambitious. Well, I mean, I understand your opinion on that, Dan. I do. I just feel that saying that out loud is I mean, you're gonna. I mean, the network probably get lambasted by people because of that.
That's
So
okay. We like having different opinions, but how much should we care? Because this is another story I saw in the U.S. about, well, two things that I'm curious if we should care or not care. But if politicians contradict themselves, how much should we care about that, and how much should we care about the history of things of that nature? I'm actually going to bring up two cases, Dan, and you're going to love one of them because it actually involves Biden and everything. Because I do know that in one case, Biden is said a lot of things against the policy that Trump had against the Chinese and all in that space. And I think he even accused Trump of being a xenophobic and all in that kind of line. And now he's turning around having a similar policy that some folks might say is just what Trump was doing originally.
Oh, he had yeah.
In the same sense of this, and that's what I want to hear everybody's
choice.
thoughts about this. In the same sense, there is a representative elect that apparently there's a lot of claims about his past history. Now, he's been elected and everything, so we really care about his family history, his work history, and his education after he's been elected, because apparently there's a whole lot of things going on around the files around what George Santos did and whether he was, forced to leave a New York private school and a number of other things that have been out there, and about his family's historical Jewish name and a number of other things that were out there about his history.
And whether he went to college or not.
Whether he went to college or not, and things along those lines. You're there in New York, so what is your take on this whole case? I don't know enough about it, but I did see that, and I know that, Lee, that you're in that general area. So is it something that folks need to care about, including the fact of whether his mother was from Brazil?
Chris, there's a short clip that Tulsi Gabbard interviewed Santos on. You need to see it. I don't know if you want to show it a part of the show, where she really goes after this guy about lying about everything, and he just says, "What's the big deal? Everybody does it, basically." He never said he was Jewish. He said he was Jewish. He said, "Well, these people," he said he worked for, well, they were clients of ours.
Yeah, I think what happens is that, well, let's take a look at, let's go to that's Republican, and I get it,
and he got passed.
Let's go to AOC for a second. Let's talk about her for a second. So originally, she was saying about how she was a scientist. She was a scientist, that she had won an award, a scientific award, and so I looked that up. Do you know what the scientific award was for? It was for a high school science project that they said that, I think she won second place, and because of that she won some, I'm going to name a star after you or something, and she took that to college, and she was a biology major, I think, or a microbiology major for, I think, a year or two, and then decided to drop that because that wasn't working out, and then ended up in economics, and that's what she states herself to be a scientist, and I sit back and I go, No, AOC, you're not a scientist. You certainly have done, I don't know if you've done any research whatsoever, research studies or microbiology studies or anything else, but cut me a break. I don't think that you quite, you can say, if that's the situation, then any person that has an AA in science is considered to be a scientist. And if you want to go that route, cool, man, I'm good with that. I mean, so there's a lot of people that lie about this stuff. Pelosi doesn't know the difference between Kwanzaa and Schwanzaa. So, I mean, cut me a break.
Chris, I got to ask you about something about that, because one of the things I was going to say is that there are a number of folks, I even know some in my own circle, that are given on a regular basis, whether it's from church organizations or whether it's from private schools or whatever, these honorary doctorates. A friend of mine that actually I was talking to a couple of days ago gets very sick when they hear these honorary doctorates and everything.
Yep.
Have you done a body of work that has caused you to get the honorary doctorate? Like my mom has a real degree, but I think she has one or two honorary doctorates, but part of it is the body of work that she did over the course of her career. But there's a lot of these that are paid for honorary doctorates, and I just y'all's thoughts.
I have no problem with that when the person is upfront about it.
Right.
There should be a star and say, you know what?
Yeah.
It's an honorary degree. I didn't do the work. I didn't do the coursework. I didn't do the time, but it was awarded to me. And yes, they deserved it, but they have to note it as such. It wasn't based on experience or what have you.
No, and like I said, that's what my mom does. Because I don't even think she uses the title doctor, but I do know, and I think y'all know some of the people as well, that they get that honorary doctorate, and then they want to be addressed as Doctor So and so. And I'm going like, but you didn't actually do the work to be a doctorate, and it's an honorary doctorate, and I'm not even sure why you got the doctorate. So that's where my issue is, and I was wondering y'all's thoughts around that, because I do think that throughout the nation and the world, there are a lot of folks that have these honorary titles, and there's no reason for them to have those titles, and they don't acknowledge that it was honorary.
Yeah, so I mean, embellishment is one thing, and then you sit back and you go, "Oh, I've done this, done that." Biden flat out lies. He lies about stuff, and he's gotten away with it throughout the campaign and throughout his presidency. He will say things that are flat out lies, and people will sit there and say, "Now, I mean, when he said at one point in a speech that his wife was killed by a truck driver who drank his lunch, and the daughter took him to cause on that and said there was an investigation done and my father was not at fault for that accident. Whatever happened, whether your wife pulled out or whatever it is, yes, he hit her. I get it, but he was not drunk. He did not. He had an analysis and whatever else. He was cleared of any wrongdoing in that situation. And the bottom line is that Biden lied, and he later on apologized to the daughter, but didn't apologize on air or in the public. So everybody, I'm not saying everybody lies. Everybody tries to embellish or make themselves look fantastic when it's not that way. Santos's situation, can be, you can mirror that. You can say, look, let's take a look. I mean, Snopes even brought out the fact that, someone said, oh, AOC graduated cum laude. People don't understand what cum laude means. I mean, cum laude means that with honors. That's what it means. So she graduated she graduated in 2011 with a Bachelor of Arts degree with 2 majors in international relations economics. Latin honors awarded was cum laude that is not tied to an individual major, but the degree. So the double degree, basically, she was cum laude. Is that true? Yes, that's true. But that doesn't make her a scientist. It makes, international relations and also cum laude. I'm not saying it's easy to get, but it's easier to get than magna or summa cum laude, right? So that's what it is. So I'm saying that
maybe she identifies as a scientist.
She's not stupid, and I think that's what a lot of people think, that she's not stupid, but she's not an expert in science. And that's something that needs to be brought up, is that she's not an expert in scientific aspects. At one point, she said that the world is going to be extinct in 12 years. That's not ridiculous, according to the 95% confidence interval, that you can say 12 years, but you have to say the entire thing, which is sometime between 12 years and 18,000 years. Sometime between 12 years and 18,000 years, the world, human beings will be extinct. Okay, I'm betting more towards the 18,000 deal. All she brought up was 12 years, and she got that from a book. She didn't get that because she went out there and calculated it herself. So that's a situation, that's a situation that it needs to be basically brought out. But George Santos, if he lied on his resume and he lied on whatever else, then you know what? You know who takes care of that? The same people who investigated AOC, the ethics committee. It needs to be brought before the ethics committee. They need to do an investigation, and they need to find out whether they're going to sanction him, or they're going to do whatever. But to sit back and say the voters that voted him in, now, he lied in his resume, so we need to get rid of him and re-elect. You know what that sounds to me? It sounds like the Democrats are not happy, so they don't like the Republican that's there. Even though there's a lot of truth to what they say, that comes out as being a political manipulation of the electoral process. Don't do that. Use that which is available to you and put them through the ethics committee and find out what's going on.
A manipulation electoral process. Now, wait a minute. Every Republican should get rid of this guy, because if you want to talk about election fraud, this guy is election fraud 2.0. Think about it.
Ethics committee. Let the ethics committee take care of it, Nick. Let the ethics committee find out what they
disagree with you.
I think they're
Nick, I don't disagree with you, but are politicians subject to background checks?
Get rid of him. He's a liar. He's what they call a pathological liar. I mean, think about it. Can you
Like
imagine?
Biden.
At least Biden didn't lie on his resume. I mean, can you imagine?
Yes, he did.
did.
Yes, he did. Yes, actually, he did lie on his resume. He did.
lie on his resume.
Yeah, he did. So I mean, and that's a situation where he said,
lies on who he's worked. Can you imagine you hired somebody? He lies on who he worked for. He lied on what schools he went. He lied on his education degree, right? And now you're going to employ him. I would fire him
talking about
immediately.
Absolutely. Private industry, absolutely, he'd be gone.
Hey, everybody here, and I know we're winding down and everything.
Congress will do their job, which they never do, and take this guy and not seat him. I mean,
speaking of which, I know we're winding down. We maybe go over a little bit since we had this Santa Claus interview earlier today.
I've worked with people like this guy. He is extremely bad
about
news.
Biden.
No, and there's bad people on both sides, the Democrats and the Republicans. But I do have to ask everybody here, and we'll wind down in another 5 minutes or so. But I got to ask folks, what is it when there is an animal, and this is actually, I think, in a Republican area and all of that, that is, most people are not exactly fans of this particular animal that I'm going to mention and everything. But apparently in Houston, they didn't have anything better to do. So they found 700 frozen bats and nursed them back to health in order for them to survive the chilly winter. So there was a chilly winter going on in there. And apparently there's these famous bats that are on the Waugh Bridge, and they were released back and everything. But I don't know a lot of folks that are big fans of bats, maybe Batman and all of that, if I can use a cultural reference. But why are they spending time to find these bats? And apparently there were 1,000 bats that plunged to the ground because of it being freezing. So the bats were suffering. I'm not saying that they weren't, but apparently they also spent some money to nurse these bats back to life in order to get them
Mark,
back
who's
in.
they? Who is they, Mark?
I'm guessing it's like these folks that are in the Houston government. I'm about to find out for exactly who nursed these folks back to health. Because I'm going like, well, they're not folks, they're not folks, they're animals. But I'm trying to figure that out myself. But
are they an endangered species?
It says in all 544 bats were rescued among Houston, around Houston, Texas, many of which suffered hypothermic shock. Nearly 700 wild bats will be released in Houston, Texas on Wednesday night after undergoing about 1 week of rehabilitation from exposure to frigid temperatures. And to answer your question, the Houston Humane Society and the Texas Wildlife Rehabilitation Coalition announced the Mexican free-tailed bats, so they're Mexican bats at that, would be released back to their colony under the city's Waugh Drive Bridge. So between Friday and Tuesday, 1,544 chili chiropters, which I think is the word for bats, were rescued in and around Houston. So it looks like it's one of those lovely nonprofit organizations that I know Nick is a big fan of, that is the ones that were doing this. So Mary Warwick, a director at the Houston Humane Society Texas Wildlife Rehabilitation Coalition, said on Tuesday that about 60 bats were still being warmed and hydrated in an incubator. The remainder were in dog kennels to keep them cool. This in turn lessens their need to eat.
Is there a chance they were endangered species, maybe, to give them the benefit? Otherwise, it makes no sense. Like, come up to New York City, and they can nurse rats back to health.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, the big rats, right?
Yeah.
The big rats.
One in City Hall.
They did a lot.
I see nothing in this article. I was trying to find that out if they were endangered, but maybe the next time we're on, Chris can find it out. But in the article, I am seeing no mention of them being an endangered species, and I know that bats are plentiful in the world, but I do not see that we're on the endangered species list, at least not in this initial article.
Why aren't they just taken to some Chinese food market?
I'm going to say a nice thing about Kamala Harris. May I?
Yes.
Yeah. Is it real
Kamala
or is it make believe?
No, it's true. Kamala Harris did service by outing Joe Biden as the racist he is. His history of racism is worse than any politician that ever held public office as president. He's a clear racist. Racist legislation, racist statements, and she verbally expressed this to the world, right? And so here, this man is being supported by the Democratic Party, right? And many black people, even though he's a racist and a liar. And everybody
Dan?
knows it.
Dan, I don't disagree with you, but why would Kamala Harris, who is of a different skin color, be in bed with him, so to speak?
Well, I
Well,
think the
because
statement that Dan is making
one
was
of the
during the
vice-
campaign.
No, I know, I understand that, but if I
Yeah,
was
right, you know,
I-
and what you said was true,
calling
wasn't
someone
it,
out
Mark?
and I believed it, I would not be their mate in this office if I thought they made a despicable person.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of folks
Yeah,
that
but
didn't
she
agree with
doesn't
each
care about
other.
whether he's a despicable person. She just cares that she got elected, and that's all he cares about too.
And
Even
I would
though
In other
argue
words,
that
her-
that's what-
cheated.
Yeah, I would
He
argue
knew
that
they
that's
were
what a
going
lot
to
of
cheat because he
politicians
said
care
so
about
in the
is whether
debate.
they get elected or don't get elected. By the way, I was going to bring up, and this probably can be brought up on the news story tomorrow. We'll go just
So I
slightly
said
over.
something
But
nice about Kamala.
you did say something nice about Kamala. Speaking of nice, I was going to let folks hear what Biden
Dan,
had
we'll
to
take
say
you out to the tool shed
after
later.
the immigration case, and then I'll close out with this, and there's a video, and then we'll see what folks have to say about it, and then we'll get out of here maybe a little bit later. But here's something that Biden said after that Congress noticed and just what's going on in immigration. So let's watch
The
this
Biden
video.
administration says it will enforce the Supreme Court's decision to keep the immigration policy known as Title 42 in place. The Trump-era COVID policy was set to expire last week and was pushed back. Tuesday's decision extends it into next year. The High Court here is going to be hearing arguments over the policy in February. This ruling is a win for Republican-led states who challenged ending the rule, allowing the U.S. to turn away asylum seekers concerned about COVID. CBS News correspondent Christina Ruffini joins us now. She is in St. Croix, where the president is on vacation. First off, Christina, how is the Biden administration responding to the Supreme Court's decision?
Good afternoon, Jared. So before he got on Marine One to come to this lovely island, I must say, last night, he was asked about this and said, look, the Supreme Court is going to decide in June. In the meantime, we're going to have to enforce it, but that a call on this measure is overdue. The White House also issued a statement from Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, and she said Title 42 is a public health measure, not immigration enforcement measure, and it should not be extended indefinitely. To truly fix our broken immigration system, we need Congress to pass comprehensive immigration reform measures like the ones President Biden proposed in his first days in office.
So let's talk about what is the president's plan to tackle immigration, and will Congress actually pass it?
Well, that last part is the key issue, right? We didn't see a lot of progress on immigration reform even when Democrats controlled both chambers. That's not going to be the case in January, so the bar is going to be even higher. There's some reporting from the New York Times and others that are talking about a couple things the White House is considering, although it hasn't been made public yet. It seems likely they're going to try to narrow the scope of who can qualify for asylum. And it's going to be possibly if you don't meet the threshold for the Convention Against Torture, you may not qualify unless you can show that you've applied for asylum. It's called a transit ban, unless you can show that you've applied for asylum in all the other countries you've passed through on the way to the southern border. Now, the thing that's interesting about that is that was part of the Stephen Miller Trump administration immigration policy that candidate Biden was very critical of on the campaign trail. But as we're seeing the surge of immigrants at the southern border, as the administration tries to grapple with this immigration policy, they're looking at all options. And so far, the response has not denied that this could be part of the package they propose in the new year.
Gotcha. A lot of things could potentially change over the next couple of weeks here. Speaking of which, President Biden is taking a bit of a break leading up to the new year and the new Congress. What's his agenda while he's in St. Croix besides some time on the beach?
It seems like a whole lot of nothing, which is a popular pastime we've found out so far here on the island. He usually goes to Mass. That's a big Biden family thing. There's a church here he sometimes goes to. Some years they've taken a family photo at a scenic overlook. But I think the president is hoping to get some sun and recharge a bit. And so are we, although we'll be here for hits whenever you need us.
You're definitely doing some good work there. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Christine.
That's a little bit about the immigration policy. We can have some further conversations about that, but that's some of what's going on in the Biden mindset. I don't know if y'all have any final thoughts around that. I'm getting ready to, and as you hear noise in the background, it's the other show that we've got going on, which is Win Charles talking about things in the human rights and advocacy space with the disabled community. And of course, she was on the show, the network before, then she was off. Back with us now for about a month or so, and we're glad to see Win Charles back with us in that space and all along those lines. So definitely, Lee and Dan, any final thoughts before I get ready to turn it over to them?
Yeah, I just don't understand why Biden really cares unless it's just a show, because he just ignores the law anyways.
Yeah, he hasn't been enforcing it, so really doesn't
Right.
matter. Yeah, I mean it's a no burger. Like the reporter described, it's a whole lot of nothing. That describes Biden's political career. Whole lot of nothing.
That's like organized crime saying they're against, murdering and stealing. They have to say
Yeah,
it,
a whole
but they
lot of
don't.
nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
Right. I know. I hope we have a better year. I mean, for the sake of this country, and I hope our freedom is protected, our liberty is bright. I hope, our leaders can grow a pair and be better leaders, that the corruption is ended, so truth and goodness can reign, that people return to their God and worship him, so we can be a blessed nation, and that our troops who are at harm's way can be safe, and that this terrible war in Ukraine can be resolved. It's a political football. Military-industrial complex is making a lot of money, so follow the money. But these poor people are struggling and trying to protect their freedom and liberty. I think that's really important. Like Lee said, it isn't about Zelensky. It's about the fight for freedom and the preservation of their homes and families and their religion. And that's important.
Dan,
So,
amazed at everything you just said.
God bless America.
Yep, no doubt. And like I said, we're here to get on out of here. But ironically, as Lee knows, because he was watching the interview, that's kind of along the lines of what the Santa Claus that we had the privilege of interviewing earlier was saying as well, because he was saying that he definitely would like to see some peace on earth and even some more faith belief as well. And I think that Lee caught a little bit of that interview. You probably heard him say that and all along those lines. So I think it is a wish that is held among many in the world, and hopefully that is what we will see in 2023. And I know that tomorrow, Friday, we'll be having our end of year review, where we'll look at some of the stories, including some that we looked at today, as well as others that have been in the news. And I think Steve will be with us moderating that one. And then, of course, we'll get ready for an exciting 2023 and all in that space. But as always, Dan and Lee, it's great to have this chance to conversate with y'all, and Nick and Chris that were here earlier, and of course others that have been popping on a regular basis during the course of the year. And I look forward to seeing y'all on tomorrow, when we'll have some more conversation and even reflection on the year, and get ready for what we hope will be a better 2023, even though we know there are some people concerned about the possibility of a recession and other things that are out there in the world. But hopefully it will be a better 2023 than it was 2022. And we will continue to strive to get that peace on earth that I know we all wish for, and all along those lines. So on that note, we're ready to get on out of here, and I'll see both of you gentlemen on tomorrow, along with whoever else decides to pop in. And hopefully folks will turn on over to keep their eyes on this network, and we'll check out Wynn Charles and some of her journeys in the disability space, all along those lines. And then we've got Barbara Smith coming on as other shows, including Coco Miller, who will be bringing musicians and other entertainers at 6 o'clock. So plenty of things that you can listen to right here on this network, podtv.tv. Right now, we're here to get on out of here.
Take care, Mark and Dan. God bless.
Thank you.
Yeah. God bless.